Colorado Territory, 1872. When the spring rains finally broke, they left behind a landscape of contradictions. Wildflowers pushing through mud, crystal streams carving through drought-hardened earth. Amelia Owens stood on her porch, watching gray clouds retreat across the endless sky, and felt her heart harden once more. At 22, she had learned the harshest lesson the frontier could teach. Hope was a luxury she could no longer afford. Her honey-blonde hair caught the breeze as she surveyed what remained of her father's dream, a modest homestead just north of Pikes Peak, where the plains began their dramatic rise toward the Rockies. The small cabin and barn had weathered another winter, but the grave marker on the hill behind them remained a stark reminder of what the frontier took without mercy. "Pa, I will not fail you," she whispered, fingers tightening around the deed in her hand. 6 months since typhoid had taken him, leaving her alone with a property too large for one person and too precious to abandon. Amelia had built her life around a simple truth. The frontier was no place for sentiment. Love was a distraction that got people killed. Her father had taught her to ride, shoot, and survive. After her mother died during their journey west when Amelia was just 12, he had raised her with unwavering practicality. Now she would honor his memory by keeping this land, even if it meant facing each dawn alone. What Amelia wanted was simple: security, independence, the respect that came from proving a woman could survive the West without a husband's protection. What she refused to acknowledge was the emptiness that settled around her each evening as the cabin grew quiet and the vast Colorado darkness pressed in. Her reverie broke at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Instinctively, her hand moved to the rifle propped against the porch railing. In the distance, a rider appeared, following the crude trail that connected her homestead to the nearest settlement of Cottonwood Springs. The stranger approached slowly, raising a hand in peaceful greeting. As he drew closer, Amelia felt an unwelcome flutter of awareness. The young cowboy sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders tapering to a trim waist. His Stetson was pushed back, revealing a face both handsome and boyish, no more than 24, with clear blue eyes that studied her homestead with obvious interest. "Good day, ma'am," he called, reining his chestnut gelding to a stop several yards from her porch. "Name's Yates Quincy. I'm looking for work." Amelia straightened, determined to show no hint of softness. "I'm not hiring, Mr. Quincy." He smiled then, revealing straight white teeth and a dimple in his left cheek. "Begging your pardon, but your north fence line says different." Saw at least 20 cattle that could wander right through those broken posts. The observation stung because it was true. Spring repairs had overwhelmed her. Each morning's tasks stretched longer than daylight allowed. "I can manage my own repairs," she said firmly. Yates dismounted with fluid grace, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His face bore only the lightest stubble, and despite his trail-worn clothes, there was something undeniably gentle in his manner. "No doubt you can, Miss Owens. Amelia Owens." She hesitated, then reluctantly added, "This was my father's place." Understanding crossed his features. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Owens." He glanced toward the distant fence line, then back to her. "I'm passing through to Denver, looking to earn my way. I'm good with cattle, better with horses, and I can fix anything that needs fixing. Food and a place in your barn for a week is all I ask." Before Amelia could refuse again, the sky darkened ominously. Thunder rolled across the plains, and the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. "Looks like we're in for another downpour," Yates observed, not moving from his spot in the yard. Rain began to soak through his shirt, plastering it to his lean frame. Something about his patient stance, refusing to presume by seeking shelter without her invitation, softened Amelia's resolve. Practical considerations won out over caution. "The barn," she conceded, nodding toward the structure. "You can stay tonight. We'll discuss the rest tomorrow." As Yates led his horse toward shelter, Amelia watched his retreating figure through the increasing rain. For the first time in months, she felt something other than determination or grief, a whisper of curiosity about this young cowboy whose arrival coincided with the season of renewal. She told herself it meant nothing, that when the fences were mended, he would ride on, and she would return to the solitude she'd convinced herself was protection. By morning's light, Amelia found Yates already at work, driving new posts along the northern fence line. She paused at the edge of the pasture, watching the easy rhythm of his movements. Every strike of his hammer was deliberate, efficient. He worked with the confidence of someone who understood that on the frontier, doing a job right the first time often meant the difference between survival and ruin. "You started early," she called, approaching with a canteen of water. Yates wiped his brow with his shirt sleeve and accepted the drink gratefully. "Best to work while the day is cool." "How much more needs replacing?" she asked, surveying his progress. "Another day's work, I reckon. Then we should ride the full boundary. Check for other weak spots before your cattle find them first." His casual use of "we" unsettled her. "Mr. Quincy, I haven't agreed to hire you beyond today." His smile appeared again, warming his eyes. "No, ma'am, you haven't. But your coffee this morning was strong enough to raise the dead, so I figured you're the kind who appreciates honest work done right." Despite herself, Amelia felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "My father always said weak coffee was an insult to the beans that died for it." Your father sounds like a wise man. The mention of her father usually brought sharp grief, but something in Yates's simple acknowledgement felt like respect rather than pity. She found herself saying, "He homesteaded here right after the war. Built everything you see with his own two hands." Yates nodded, looking across the property with genuine appreciation. "He chose well. Good water, decent grazing, protected from the north winds by that ridge." "You know ranching," she observed. "Born to it." His expression clouded briefly. "My family had a spread in Texas. Lost it 2 years back." "Indians?" she asked, the common frontier tragedy. He shook his head. "Banks and lawyers. After my parents died, turned out the deed wasn't as clear as we thought. My brother tried fighting it in court, but—" he shrugged, the gesture conveying all the injustice of frontier law. "I've been working my way north ever since." The revelation of his own loss changed something between them, establishing a ground of shared understanding. Amelia found herself nodding toward the fence. "Finish this section today. If it's done properly, we can discuss the rest of the boundary tomorrow." Later that afternoon, a commotion from the corral drew Amelia from the vegetable garden. She rounded the cabin to find Yates attempting to gentle her most stubborn mare, a spirited 3-year-old that had consistently rejected any attempt at saddle breaking. "She'll throw you," Amelia warned, approaching the fence. "Buttercup's got a devil in her." Yates chuckled, never taking his eyes from the nervous horse. "Buttercup? That's a mighty delicate name for a mare with murder in her eyes. My father named her. Said her color reminded him of the flowers my mother loved." The horse snorted and sidestepped, but Yates moved with her, his voice a low, constant murmur. Gradually, the mare's ears flicked forward instead of lying flat against her head. "The trick isn't forcing them," he explained, slowly extending his hand palm up. "It's convincing them that what you want is what they want too." "Is that how you convince everyone to do things your way, Mr. Quincy?" Amelia asked dryly. His laugh was unexpected and genuine. "If only, Miss Owens. Most folks are considerably more stubborn than horses." As the mare cautiously stretched her neck to sniff his palm, Amelia felt something shift inside her, the first crack in a wall she'd built so carefully. This stranger saw value in patience and gentle persuasion, where the frontier usually rewarded only force. Before she could examine the feeling further, the distant sound of approaching riders caught their attention. 3 men on horseback were approaching from the direction of town. "You expecting visitors?" Yates asked, his posture instantly alert. "No," Amelia replied, her stomach tightening. She recognized the lead rider, Vernon Haskell, owner of the largest ranch in the county and a man who'd made no secret of his desire to absorb her land into his holdings. "Miss Owens," Haskell called as they reined to a stop. A barrel-chested man in his 40s with a meticulously groomed mustache, he surveyed her property with proprietary interest. "I see you've hired help. Wise decision for a woman alone." "Mr. Haskell," she acknowledged coldly. "What brings you to my property?" His smile never reached his eyes. "Just being neighborly. Heard in town you were struggling with the spring work. My offer still stands, fair price for this land, and you could move into town like a proper lady. As I've told you before, this land is not for sale." Haskell's gaze shifted to Yates, who had quietly positioned himself beside Amelia. "And who might you be, boy?" "Yates Quincy, sir. Working for Miss Owens." "Quincy?" Haskell's eyes narrowed. "Any relation to the Quincy outfit from South Texas?" A flicker of tension crossed Yates's face. My family, yes. Something unspoken passed between the men, a current of recognition that Amelia couldn't decipher. Interesting, Haskell mused. Well, Miss Owens, you should know that hiring drifters can be risky business. Not everyone passing through these parts has an honest history. I believe I'm capable of judging character for myself, Mr. Haskell, Amelia replied sharply. Haskell nodded to his men, and they turned their horses. As you wish. But my offer won't remain open indefinitely. Land's only valuable when you can work it properly. As they rode away, Amelia turned to Yates. What was that about? He seemed to know your name. Yates kept his eyes on the retreating riders. The Quincy name carries some history in Texas. Not all of it pleasant. He faced her directly. If my presence here brings you trouble, I'll move on. Is there something in your past I should know about? His eyes held her steadily. Nothing that would endanger you. But men like Haskell enjoy having power over others. Information is power out here. The cryptic answer should have reinforced her caution, but instead, Amelia found herself intrigued. Everyone on the frontier carried secrets. What mattered were the choices made in the present. The fence still needs finishing, Mr. Quincy. I suggest you get back to work. The relief in his smile was subtle but unmistakable. Yes, ma'am. As she returned to her garden, Amelia felt her carefully ordered world beginning to shift. Haskell's appearance was a reminder of her vulnerability as a woman alone, yet Yates's presence had changed the dynamic. For the first time since her father's death, someone else had stood beside her against those who would take what was hers. The feeling was as dangerous as it was comforting. Days stretched into a week, then two. Yates proved himself invaluable, tackling repairs that had languished since winter, patching the barn roof, reinforcing the corral, clearing irrigation ditches. More surprising was how quickly Amelia adapted to his presence. The sound of his whistle as he worked, the way he remembered how she took her coffee, the easy conversations that gradually extended into the evenings. One night, as they sat on the porch watching twilight settle across the plains, Amelia found herself sharing memories she'd kept locked away. Pa was determined to give me an education, even out here. Every night, no matter how tired he was, we'd read together by lamplight. Said a person might survive with strong hands, but they only truly lived with a strong mind. Yates nodded, whittling a small piece of wood with practiced strokes. My mother was the same. Had books sent from back east whenever she could afford it. My brother used to tease that she was raising gentlemen instead of cowboys. You had a good childhood, she observed. I was lucky, he agreed. Not everyone gets that foundation. And now? What are your plans once you reach Denver? His hands stilled momentarily. Truth is, I'm not sure Denver holds what I'm looking for. And what exactly are you looking for, Mr. Quincy? In the fading light, his expression was contemplative. A place that needs what I have to offer. Somewhere I can build something that lasts. The simplicity of his answer resonated with her own deepest desire, not just to survive, but to create something meaningful from the raw materials of the frontier. Before she could respond, a flicker of movement at the edge of the property caught her attention. There, she said quietly, pointing toward the tree line. Something's spooking the cattle. Yates was on his feet instantly, reaching for the rifle that now rested by the door. They listened intently to the night sounds, the routine chirping of crickets punctuated by the nervous lowing of cattle. Could be a mountain lion, he suggested. Or rustlers, Amelia countered, retrieving her own weapon. Haskell's men have been known to help themselves to unbranded calves from smaller spreads. They moved silently toward the pasture, the full moon providing enough light to navigate by. As they approached the restless herd, a shot cracked through the night. Instinctively, Yates pulled Amelia behind the shelter of a large oak. That was no warning shot, he whispered, peering around the trunk. Someone's aiming to hit something. Heart pounding, Amelia gripped her rifle. My father died protecting this land. I won't lose it to thieves. Yates's expression was grim in the moonlight. And I won't let you die for it, either. Stay here. Before she could protest, he had slipped away, using the scattered trees for cover as he worked his way toward the source of the shot. Amelia waited, counting her breaths, every sense straining for danger. When a second shot rang out, followed by a muffled cry, fear gripped her. Unable to remain hidden, she moved forward cautiously. Near the edge of the pasture, she found Yates crouched beside a fallen figure, a young boy no more than 16, clutching his bleeding arm. "Don't shoot, ma'am," the boy pleaded when he saw her approach. "I didn't mean no harm. He's from the Wilson place," Yates explained, using his bandana to bind the boy's wound. "Says he was tracking a mountain lion that's been taking their sheep." "Is that true?" Amelia demanded, keeping her rifle trained on the boy. "Yes'm. My pa's gonna tan me good for coming out alone, but that cat took 3 lambs yesterday. I tracked it here and got off a shot, but I missed. Then this fella came up behind me and startled me so bad I pulled the trigger again." He looked sheepishly at Yates. "Sorry for grazing you, mister." Amelia's eyes widened as she noticed the torn sleeve of Yates's shirt, dark with blood. "You're hurt." "Just a scratch," he assured her. "But this young man needs his wound cleaned properly." And probably a stern talk about announcing himself before hunting on other folks' land. Relief and concern warred within her as they helped the boy to the cabin. While Amelia tended his injury, Yates rode to the Wilson homestead to inform the family. By the time he returned with the boy's worried father, Amelia had fed the young hunter and extracted a promise that he would never again hunt alone at night. Later, after their unexpected guests had departed, Amelia insisted on examining Yates's arm. "It truly is just a graze," he protested as she cleaned the shallow wound with whiskey. "You could have been killed," she said, her voice unsteady, "if that boy had been a better shot. But he wasn't," Yates interrupted gently. "And now we know it's a mountain lion threatening the stock, not rustlers." Amelia's hands stilled on his arm, suddenly aware of their proximity in the lamplit cabin. "You went out there to protect me," she said quietly. "Why?" His eyes met hers, serious and direct. "Because some things are worth protecting, Amelia." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a tremor through her. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Yates carefully withdrew his arm and stood. "We should both get some rest. If there's a mountain lion around, we'll need to organize a proper hunt tomorrow." As he bid her good night and retreated to the barn, Amelia remained by the table, her thoughts in disarray. For years, she had convinced herself that independence meant isolation, that needing no one was the surest form of strength. Yet tonight, witnessing Yates's willingness to face danger for her sake had awakened a long-dormant yearning for connection. The realization was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. The hunt for the mountain lion brought neighbors from miles around, a reminder that even in the vastness of the frontier, communities formed around shared threats. Yates organized the men into search parties, his natural leadership drawing respect even from those initially suspicious of a newcomer. Watching him coordinate with experienced hunters, Amelia saw him through others' eyes, capable, intelligent, and unfailingly courteous. Several of the neighboring women remarked on her good fortune in finding such handsome help, their knowing glances suggesting they believed there was more between them than employer and worker. The lion was finally tracked to a rocky outcropping 5 miles west. When the hunting party returned victorious, Amelia hosted an impromptu celebration, the cabin filled with neighbors sharing food and stories late into the evening. As the last guests departed, leaving them alone in the lantern light, Yates helped her clear away the remnants of the gathering. "Your neighbors think highly of you," he observed, stacking plates. "I've heard at least 3 different stories about how you saved the Jenkins baby during that blizzard last winter." Amelia smiled, remembering the treacherous journey through snowdrifts to deliver medicine. "People help each other out here. It's the only way to survive." "Is that all it is? Survival?" The question lingered as she wiped down the table. "What else would it be?" "Connection. Belonging." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Your father built this place, but you're the one building community around it. People trust you, respect you. That's rare, especially for a woman alone on the frontier." His observation touched something deep within her, the recognition that despite her determination to need no one, she had still woven herself into the fabric of this place and its people. "What about you?" she asked, deflecting attention from her sudden vulnerability. "You've been here nearly a month now. The fence is fixed, the roof doesn't leak. Even Buttercup lets you saddle her. Denver must be wondering what's become of you." Yates leaned against the doorframe, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about that. Farley Wilson offered me work after the hunt today. Says he could use help expanding his sheep operation." The news should have brought relief. an easy solution to the increasingly complicated feelings Yates's presence stirred in her. Instead, Amelia felt a hollow opening in her chest. "The Wilsons are good people," she said, focusing on folding a tablecloth. "Their place is what, 4 miles from here?" "About that." He watched her movements, seemingly waiting for something more. When she offered nothing further, he straightened. "I told them I'd think on it. Good night, Amelia." After he left, she stood alone in the quiet cabin, surrounded by the evidence of community and connection. Things she had told herself were luxuries she couldn't afford. Yet here they were, already woven into her life despite her determination to remain emotionally self-sufficient. And now Yates, the man who had somehow slipped past her defenses, was considering moving on, if not to Denver then to a neighboring farm. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it felt like impending loss. The following morning, Amelia rode to town for supplies, grateful for the solitude to organize her thoughts. In Cottonwood Springs, she completed her business efficiently until a conversation at the general store caught her attention. "Heard Haskell's been asking questions about that young cowboy staying at the Owens place," the shopkeeper was telling another customer. "Sent a telegram all the way to Texas, from what I gather." Amelia paused, pretending to examine a bolt of calico while listening intently. "What's he after?" the other woman asked. "Don't rightly know, but Haskell doesn't investigate a man unless there's something in it for him. Last fella he took that much interest and ended up run out of the county on charges that seemed mighty convenient for Haskell's land ambitions." The conversation shifted to other topics, but Amelia had heard enough to kindle her concern. Whatever history existed between Haskell and the Quincy name, it seemed the rancher was actively pursuing it. Her worry deepened when she encountered Haskell himself as she loaded her purchases into her wagon. "Miss Owens," he greeted her with exaggerated courtesy. "How fortunate to find you in town. I've been meaning to call on you again." "Mr. Haskell," she acknowledged stiffly. "I'm rather busy today." His smile never wavered. "This won't take but a moment. I wanted to share some information about your hired man that might interest you." Information that arrived by telegraph just yesterday. Amelia's heart quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. "Mr. Quincy's past is his own business." "Is it? Even when that past includes involvement in one of the bloodiest range wars in Texas history?" "The Quincy brothers were at the center of the Mason County War, Miss Owens. Men died. Some would say murdered." Though his words sent a chill through her, Amelia lifted her chin defiantly. "If you have accusations to make, perhaps you should take them to the sheriff rather than spreading gossip to me." Haskell's eyes hardened. "I'm merely concerned for your safety, living alone with a man whose family name is associated with such violence, especially when that man seems to have no fixed destination or purpose. Your concern is noted but unnecessary. Good day, Mr. Haskell." As she drove her wagon out of town, Amelia's mind raced. Range wars were notorious on the frontier, bitter conflicts over land and water rights that often descended into brutal violence. That Yates had been involved in such a struggle explained his reluctance to discuss his past in detail, but it raised unsettling questions about the man she had come to trust. Upon returning to the homestead, she found Yates repairing a broken wheel on the hay wagon, his sleeves rolled up in the afternoon heat. Watching him work, it was difficult to imagine him as part of something as ugly as a range war. Yet the frontier shaped men in ways that weren't always visible on the surface. "Town was busy today," she said, approaching with deliberate casualness. "Seems news travels fast around here." He glanced up, wiping his hands on a rag. "That's the way of small settlements. Everyone knows everyone's business. Or thinks they do," she agreed. Taking a breath, she added, "I heard your name mentioned. Something about Texas and Mason County." Yates's hands stilled, his expression closing like a door. "Haskell's been digging." "Then it's true." He straightened, meeting her gaze directly. "Parts of it. My family was caught in the Mason County troubles. My brother fought. I was younger, mostly tried to keep our ranch running while everything fell apart around us." "Were people killed?" "Yes." The single word carried the weight of memories he clearly preferred not to revisit. It was a brutal time. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Men who'd once shared meals together started shooting on sight. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I never killed anyone, Amelia, but I won't claim my hands are entirely clean. No one who lived through that time can say that." The frank admission held no defensiveness, only a weary acceptance of painful truth. It matched what she had observed of his character, not a man without flaws, but one who faced them honestly. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Would you have hired me if I had?" A young woman alone, taking on a man with a history of frontier violence. His smile held no humor. "Besides, I've been trying to outrun that history. To be judged for who I am now, not for a name tangled up in old blood feuds." The explanation resonated with her own desire to be seen as more than just a woman vulnerable to the frontier's harshness. Before she could respond, however, the sound of approaching riders interrupted them. 3 men appeared, none of whom she recognized. They rode directly into the yard with the confidence of men who believed they had every right to be there. "That's him," one said, pointing at Yates. Quincy's youngest. Yates stepped forward, positioning himself between Amelia and the newcomers. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The lead rider, a weather-beaten man with cold eyes, dismounted slowly. "Been tracking you across 3 territories, boy. Haskell's telegram said we'd find you here." He glanced at Amelia. "Ma'am, you should step away. This doesn't concern you." "This is my property," Amelia stated firmly. "Whatever business you have can be conducted civilly or not at all." The man's expression darkened. "My brother died in Mason County, shot in the back while trying to move his cattle to market. Quincy men were seen in the area that day." "That was 5 years ago," Yates replied evenly. "And as I've told everyone who's asked, I was 20 miles away when those shots were fired. My brother was with the cattle drive, but he's sworn under oath he fired no shots that day." "Convenient stories," the man sneered. "But Judge Carlton finally issued warrants last month for both Quincy brothers." The revelation visibly shocked Yates. "What?" "That case was dismissed for lack of evidence. New witness came forward. Says he saw you both." Amelia stepped forward. "If you have a legal warrant, take it to our county sheriff. This is not a courthouse." The man's hand moved toward his holster. "We're not waiting on more legal wrangling, ma'am. Justice has been delayed long enough." In one fluid motion, Yates drew his own weapon. "I wouldn't if I were you. Not here. Not with a lady present." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the leader slowly raised his hands, though his expression remained murderous. "We'll do this proper-like. Town of Cottonwood Springs has a jail, I reckon. We'll escort Mr. Quincy there and wire the Texas authorities." "And if I refuse to go?" Yates asked quietly. "Then we take you anyway, alive or otherwise." Amelia's mind raced. If Yates resisted, blood would be spilled on her land, possibly his. If he went willingly, he would be at the mercy of a legal system that, on the frontier, often served the powerful rather than the just. "I'll go with you," she decided abruptly. "To town. We'll sort this out with Sheriff Davis directly." The leader frowned. "This isn't your concern, lady. Mr. Quincy works for me. That makes it my concern." Her voice allowed no argument. "I'll hitch my wagon. Mr. Quincy will ride with me, unarmed. You gentlemen can follow." Yates turned to her, his voice low. "Amelia, you don't have to involve yourself in this." "I'm already involved," she replied simply. The journey to town passed in tense silence, the 3 riders following close behind their wagon. As they approached Cottonwood Springs, Amelia finally spoke. "Is there a warrant, truly? Or is this some scheme of Haskell's?" Yates kept his eyes on the road ahead. "There could be. The Mason County troubles never really ended, just went quiet for a while. Too many grievances left unsettled." He glanced at her. "I'm sorry to bring this to your doorstep." "You didn't. They did." She hesitated, then added, "Whatever happens in town, don't make yourself an easy target. Promise me." His expression softened momentarily. "I promise." Sheriff Davis was waiting when they arrived, apparently forewarned of their coming. A stocky man with a graying mustache and tired eyes, he listened impassively as the Texans presented their case and a document they claimed was a proper warrant. "I'll need to verify this," Davis said finally. "Telegraph office is closed for the night. Quincy can stay in my jail until morning when we can confirm with the authorities in Texas." "And these men," Amelia demanded, "will they also be detained for threatening violence on my property?" Davis sighed. "Miss Owens, they claim to be acting as legal representatives. They threatened to take him alive or otherwise," she interrupted. "Those were their exact words." "Is that true, Slattery?" Davis asked the leader. The man shrugged unapologetically. "We came prepared for resistance. Fugitives don't always come peaceful-like." Mr. Quincy is not a fugitive until that warrant is verified, Amelia insisted. And I'll be staying in town tonight to ensure the process is conducted properly. As Yates was led away to the small jailhouse, he caught her eye briefly. The look they shared contained more than words could express: concern, gratitude, and something deeper that neither had yet acknowledged aloud. Amelia spent the night at the town's small hotel, barely sleeping as she considered the possible outcomes of the morning. If the warrant was legitimate, Yates would be taken back to Texas to face charges that could result in prison or worse. If it was false, Haskell's involvement suggested a scheme to remove Yates from her property. But to what end? Dawn had barely broken when she heard the commotion in the street. Rushing to her window, she saw a crowd gathering outside the telegraph office. Dressing quickly, she hurried downstairs to find Sheriff Davis addressing the townspeople. "The warrant appears genuine," he announced as she approached. "I've received confirmation from the circuit judge in Mason County." Amelia pushed her way forward. "What exactly are the charges?" Davis turned to her with something like sympathy. "Conspiracy to commit murder, Miss Owens. During the Mason County War, the Quincy brothers are wanted for questioning in the deaths of 3 men. Questioning or trial?" she demanded. "That's for the Texas courts to decide. Not mine. When will they take him?" "The next eastbound stage. Day after tomorrow." The news hit her like a physical blow. 2 days. Just 2 days before Yates would be gone, possibly forever, to face charges in a conflict that had obviously cost him everything once already. At the jailhouse, she found him seated on a narrow cot in the single cell, his expression resigned but calm. "You should go home, Amelia," he said when Davis allowed her a few minutes to speak with him. "There's nothing to be done now." "Is the warrant real?" she asked directly. He nodded slowly. "Likely so. The man who died, James Slattery, was a prominent rancher. His family's been pushing for arrests for years." "Did you do it?" "Any of it?" Yates met her gaze unflinchingly. "No. I was at our ranch that day. But my brother was with the cattle drive where Slattery was killed. He's always sworn he wasn't involved, and I believe him. Then why run? Why not face the charges years ago?" A shadow crossed his face. "Because in Mason County, the Quincy name became poison. No jury would be impartial. My brother told me to go north, start fresh somewhere no one knew our history." He smiled grimly. "I almost made it." Amelia gripped the cell bars. "This isn't right. There must be something, Amelia." His voice gentled as he stood and approached the bars. "The best thing you can do is return to your land. Protect what your father built. Don't let Haskell or anyone else take advantage while you're distracted by my troubles." "Haskell," she repeated, sudden clarity dawning. "This is about my land. He must have recognized your name, investigated your past, and arranged for these men to find you." "It's possible," Yates agreed cautiously, "though the warrant itself appears legitimate. Don't you see? If you're gone, I'm alone again. Vulnerable. The timing of his offer to buy my land, then this." She straightened with renewed determination. "I'm not giving up. Not on my land, and not on you." Before Yates could respond, Sheriff Davis returned to escort her out. As she departed, Yates called after her, "Whatever you're thinking, Amelia, be careful. Haskell has influence in this county." Outside, Amelia found Cottonwood Springs buzzing with gossip about the Texas fugitive. Several people expressed sympathy when they recognized her, assuming her distress came from having unknowingly harbored a wanted man. No one seemed to question the convenience of the timing or Haskell's potential involvement. As she prepared to return to her homestead, a familiar voice called her name. Turning, she found Martha Wilson, the mother of the boy who had been hunting the mountain lion. "Miss Owens, I heard what happened. Such a terrible business." The older woman's kind face creased with concern. "Will you be all right out there alone again?" "I managed before Mr. Quincy arrived," Amelia replied, though the prospect of returning to solitude now felt surprisingly hollow. Martha nodded understandingly. "Of course you did. Still, if you need anything." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "My Timothy speaks very highly of your Mr. Quincy. Says he was a perfect gentleman when that foolishness with the hunting accident happened. Doesn't sound like a killer to me." The simple statement of support warmed Amelia. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Some men around here might not mind seeing a neighboring spread struggle," Martha continued meaningfully, "especially when it's owned by a young woman alone." The implication was clear. Martha, too, suspected Haskell's hand in the situation. Amelia squeezed the older woman's hand gratefully before continuing to her wagon. The ride home felt longer than usual, the landscape unchanged yet somehow emptier, knowing Yates would not be waiting. As she crested the final rise and her cabin came into view, Amelia was startled to see two riders already in her yard, one of whom was unmistakably Vernon Haskell. Squaring her shoulders, she drove directly to the house, where Haskell and one of his men waited on horseback. "Miss Owens," Haskell greeted her with exaggerated concern. "I heard the unfortunate news. A shocking development. Having a wanted man living on your property all this time." "Remarkable timing," she replied coldly, remaining seated in her wagon. "Your sudden interest in Texas fugitives just when I refused to sell my land." His expression hardened briefly before smoothing into practiced sympathy. "I understand you're upset. Finding out someone you trusted has a violent past would disturb anyone. That's actually why I'm here, to renew my offer for your property." He gestured expansively. "In light of recent events, I'm prepared to increase my bid by 10%. Enough for you to establish yourself comfortably in town, away from the vulnerabilities of frontier life." "Mr. Haskell, my answer remains unchanged. This land is not for sale. Miss Owens, be reasonable. A woman alone cannot possibly manage." "I managed before Mr. Quincy arrived," she interrupted, echoing her earlier words to Martha Wilson. "And I will continue to manage. Now, I would appreciate it if you would leave my property." Haskell's facade of concern vanished entirely. "You're making a mistake. The frontier isn't kind to those who stand alone against its realities." "Is that a threat, Mr. Haskell?" He smiled thinly. "Merely an observation of frontier truth, Miss Owens. Good day." As the two men rode away, Amelia remained in her wagon, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. Haskell's intentions were now unmistakable. He had orchestrated Yates's removal to weaken her position and force the sale of her land. The question was what he might do next if she continued to refuse him. Inside the cabin, everything remained as they had left it that morning. Yates's coffee cup still on the table, his work gloves by the door. Small reminders of how quickly he had become integral to this place, and to her. For the first time since her father's death, Amelia allowed herself to weep, not from weakness, but from the ache of recognizing what she stood to lose. Not just Yates's labor or protection, but his companionship, his quiet strength, the way his smile transformed his entire face. Somewhere in the weeks of working side by side, respect had deepened into affection, and affection into something she had sworn never to allow herself to feel. By evening, her grief had hardened into resolve. If Haskell believed removing Yates would leave her vulnerable, he had gravely misjudged her character. And if there was any chance of preventing a miscarriage of justice, she would find it. At dawn, she rode back to town with renewed purpose. Her first stop was the telegraph office, where she sent messages to several recipients: the circuit judge in Mason County, the Texas Ranger office, and finally, to an address in northern Texas that Yates had once mentioned in passing as his brother's last known location. Next, she visited Judge Franklin, the county's elderly but sharp-minded judicial authority, presenting her suspicions about the timing and circumstances of Yates's arrest. Though sympathetic, the judge was limited in his ability to intervene in an extradition based on a seemingly valid warrant. "The law must take its course, Miss Owens," he explained gently. "If Mr. Quincy is innocent, he should be able to prove that in a Texas court. And if the Texas court is as corrupt as the process that brought these charges 5 years after the fact," she challenged. The judge sighed. "Then we must trust that truth will eventually prevail. It often does, though sometimes more slowly than we might wish." It was not the answer she had hoped for, but Amelia refused to surrender to despair. Her final stop was the jail, where Sheriff Davis reluctantly allowed her another brief visit with Yates. He looked up in surprise when she entered. "Amelia, I told you to go home. And I decided not to take that particular advice," she replied, setting down a basket containing fresh bread, dried beef, and other provisions. "You'll need proper food for the journey." His expression softened at her thoughtfulness. "You didn't have to do this. I've sent telegrams," she informed him, keeping her voice low. "To the judge, to the Rangers, and to your brother. If there's any legal way to fight this, we'll find it." Concern crossed his features. "Telegrams cost money." "My money to spend as I choose," she countered. Yates moved closer to the bars, his voice dropping further. Amelia, listen to me. Haskell's determined to get your land. With me gone, he'll press harder. Promise me you'll be careful. I can handle Vernon Haskell. I believe you can. But not if you're distracted fighting battles in Texas that may not be winnable. His hands wrapped around the bars, inches from hers. Your father built that homestead for you. Don't risk losing it over me. The concern in his eyes, for her, not himself, cracked something open inside her. You told me once that some things are worth protecting. Did you mean it? Of course. Then understand that I feel the same way. She hesitated, then added softly. You became important to me, Yates. Important in ways I never expected to allow. The naked vulnerability in her admission visibly affected him. His knuckles whitened around the bars. Amelia, time's up, Miss Owens, Sheriff Davis interrupted from the doorway. Stage leaves at noon tomorrow. You can say your final goodbyes then. As she reluctantly turned to leave, Yates called after her. Whatever happens, remember that finding your homestead was the best wrong turn I ever took. The simple declaration carried the weight of everything they'd left unspoken. Regret for what might have been, gratitude for what they'd shared, and the painful acknowledgement that frontier justice might prevent them from discovering what could develop between them. That night, Amelia slept in town again, unwilling to be absent for Yates's departure. When morning came, she dressed with special care in her best calico dress, a small defiance against circumstance, wanting him to remember her as more than just the determined homesteader in practical work clothes. The stagecoach was already waiting when she arrived at the jailhouse. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the drama of a Texas fugitive being returned to face justice. Among them, Amelia noted with icy clarity, stood Vernon Haskell, watching the proceedings with poorly disguised satisfaction. Sheriff Davis emerged with Yates, whose hands were bound before him. Despite this indignity, he carried himself with quiet dignity, nodding respectfully to those townspeople who had known him during his brief stay. When his eyes found Amelia, something flickered in their depths, regret, longing, and a steely resolve that matched her own. As he was led to the stage, Amelia stepped forward. I'd like a moment, Sheriff. To say goodbye. Davis hesitated, then nodded, stepping back to give them a semblance of privacy amid the onlookers. You look beautiful, Yates said softly, his gaze taking in her carefully arranged hair and Sunday dress. I wanted you to have something worthwhile to remember, she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. His smile was gentle. I would have remembered you regardless, Amelia Owens. This isn't over, she promised. Whatever it takes, I'll find a way to help prove your innocence. I know you will. But promise me something in return. His bound hands reached for hers, their fingers briefly intertwining. Don't let Haskell win. That land is your legacy. Fight for it as fiercely as you're fighting for me. I promise, she whispered. For a breathless moment, it seemed he might lean forward to kiss her. Public scrutiny be damned. Instead, he squeezed her hands and murmured, When I first arrived, you told me you weren't looking for anything beyond labor. Certainly not. Time to go, Quincy, one of the Texans interrupted, moving forward to escort him to the stage. As Yates was led away, he glanced back over his shoulder. Remember what I said about Buttercup? Sometimes the gentlest approach works where force fails. The cryptic reminder of their conversation about the mare puzzled Amelia until the stagecoach departed, carrying Yates and his Texas escorts out of Cottonwood Springs and toward an uncertain fate. Only then, watching the dust settle in its wake, did she grasp his meaning. Haskell expected her to fight directly, to struggle openly against his attempts to claim her land. Perhaps, like with Buttercup, a different approach might prove more effective. As the crowd dispersed, Haskell approached, his expression a study in false sympathy. A difficult day, Miss Owens. If you've reconsidered my offer, I'd be happy to discuss terms that would allow you to put all this unpleasantness behind you. Amelia regarded him coolly, Yates's words echoing in her mind. Actually, Mr. Haskell, I have been considering my situation. Perhaps we could discuss it tomorrow? At my property. Surprise and satisfaction warred in his expression. Of course. Shall we say noon? That would be suitable, she agreed, her tone carefully neutral. As Haskell walked away, clearly believing he had finally worn down her resistance, Amelia felt a strange calm settle over her. If Haskell wanted her land, He would have to contend not just with her determination to keep it, but with her newfound understanding that connection to place, to community, and to Yates Quincy had become the foundation of her strength, not its weakness. The following days unfolded according to her careful design. When Haskell arrived at her homestead, expecting to negotiate a sale, he instead found Amelia hosting a gathering of neighboring families. The Wilsons, the Jenkinses, and several others who had benefited from her help or Yates's during recent months. "What's all this?" he demanded, clearly discomfited by the unexpected audience. "Community, Mr. Haskell," Amelia replied calmly. "I've invited my neighbors to witness our discussion about the future of this land. After all, what happens here affects everyone in the valley." The transparent strategy, ensuring that Haskell's pressure tactics would have witnesses, visibly angered him, but he controlled himself in front of the assembled homesteaders. Their presence effectively prevented any threats or manipulation, forcing him to present his offer in straightforward business terms that, when laid bare, revealed how significantly he was undervaluing her property. "This is highly irregular," he protested when several of the men began asking pointed questions about water rights and grazing access that would be affected if her land were absorbed into his holdings. "Perhaps," Amelia agreed pleasantly. "But as you yourself pointed out, a woman alone must be practical about frontier realities. And the reality is that this community has thrived because we support one another. Any change to one property affects us all." By the time Haskell departed, empty-handed and furious, Amelia had not only reinforced her refusal to sell, but had effectively mobilized her neighbors' awareness of his tactics. The implicit message was clear: any misfortune that befell her property in coming weeks would be viewed with collective suspicion. That evening, after her neighbors had gone, Martha Wilson's husband Robert lingered behind. A weather-beaten man in his 50s, he had said little during the confrontation with Haskell, but now he approached Amelia with quiet purpose. "That was well handled, Miss Owens," he commended. "Haskell's not accustomed to being outmaneuvered, especially by a woman." "Thank you for coming," she replied. "Having witnesses made all the difference." "About your cowboy," he continued, surprising her. "Timothy's been pestering me since the arrest. Says the man saved his life during that mountain lion business. Treated him with respect even after he'd been shot." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "The boy's got good instincts about people. If he says Quincy's a decent sort, I'm inclined to believe him." "He is," Amelia confirmed softly. "Well, my brother-in-law rides circuit with the Colorado Territorial Marshals. If there's anything irregular about how those Texans conducted their business, he might be able to help." He handed her a folded paper. "That's where to reach him. Can't promise anything, but family looks after family out here." The unexpected support brought tears to her eyes. "Mr. Wilson, I don't know what to say." He shrugged, embarrassed by her emotion. "Just being neighborly, like you were when our Timothy needed help. Frontier works that way, or it should." After he left, Amelia sat on her porch, watching twilight settle over the land she had fought so hard to protect. For the first time, she truly understood what her father had valued about this place. Not just the property itself, but the community it anchored her within. A community that had recognized Yates's worth as quickly as she had, and now stood ready to help them both. As days stretched into weeks, Amelia divided her time between managing her homestead and pursuing every possible avenue to help Yates. Responses to her telegrams yielded frustratingly little concrete information. The Texas Rangers confirmed the warrant, but provided no details about new evidence. The circuit judge refused to discuss a pending case, and Yates's brother remained unreachable. Robert Wilson's Marshall connection proved more useful, raising questions about procedural irregularities in how the Texans had transported Yates across territorial boundaries. While not enough to invalidate the extradition, it created a record of scrutiny that might benefit his case. A month after Yates's departure, Amelia received her first letter from him, brief and carefully worded, as befitted correspondence from a county jail. He reported that he was being treated fairly while awaiting trial, that his court-appointed lawyers seemed competent, and that he thought of her homestead often. Between the lines, she read his concern for her well-being and his undiminished connection to the life they had briefly shared. She wrote back immediately, informing him of Haskell's thwarted attempts and the community's support. In what became a weekly exchange, they continued a conversation that deepened despite distance and uncertainty, sharing observations about weather and seasons, memories of shared work, and gradually, more personal reflections on how their brief time together had affected them both. The strangest thing about this jail cell, Yates wrote in his third letter, is that for the first time in 5 years, I'm not running anymore. There's a peculiar freedom in that. Whatever happens now, I face it as myself, not as a man hiding from his name or his past. You helped me find that courage, Amelia. Her reply acknowledged her own transformation. I spent so long believing that independence meant isolation, that needing no one was the surest path to strength. You showed me that true strength comes from connection, not from its absence. My father built these walls, but you helped me see beyond them. Summer faded into autumn, and the date of Yates's trial approached. Amelia made arrangements to travel to Mason County, determined to be present despite the distance and expense. The night before her planned departure, however, an unexpected visitor arrived at her homestead. The sound of approaching hoofbeats in the darkness sent her reaching for her rifle, a habit that months of vigilance had reinforced. She stepped onto the porch, weapon ready, and called out, "Identify yourself." "Amelia Owens," a deep voice responded. "I'm looking for the woman who's been writing to my brother." Her heart stuttered as a tall figure dismounted in the yard. Even in the dim moonlight, the resemblance was unmistakable, the same lean build and easy grace, though this man was older, his face more weathered by frontier hardship. "You're Yates's brother," she breathed, lowering her rifle. He approached the porch, removing his hat. "Caleb Quincy, ma'am. Sorry for arriving so late. Been riding hard since I got your telegrams." "Telegrams? But I only sent one, months ago. And I never received it," he confirmed. "But Yates wrote to me after his arrest. Told me where to find you if..." He hesitated. "If things went badly at the trial." A cold dread settled in her stomach. "What's happened?" "Is he..." "He's alive," Caleb assured her quickly. "But the situation has grown complicated. May we speak inside?" Over coffee at her kitchen table, Caleb explained the tangled history that had led to the current crisis. The Mason County War had been more than a simple range dispute. It had involved ethnic tensions, political maneuvering, and a legacy of bitterness that still poisoned local justice. "The new witness they claim to have is Slattery's cousin," Caleb explained. "A man who's been in prison himself until recently, suddenly released, and now willing to testify that he saw Yates and me at the scene of his cousin's killing." "Is it true?" Amelia asked directly. Caleb met her gaze unflinchingly. "No. Yates was at our ranch that day, as he's always maintained. I was with the cattle drive, but I never fired a shot. Slattery was killed from ambush. Most folks believed it was German settlers he'd threatened earlier that week." "Then why would this cousin lie?" "A reduced sentence for his own crimes, most likely. And the Slattery family has always blamed us. We were vocal opponents of their tactics during the Troubles." He sighed heavily. "But proving that in a Mason County courtroom, with a jury selected from people who lived through those bitter times? Nearly impossible. So what can be done?" Amelia demanded, unwilling to accept defeat. "That's why I'm here." Caleb reached into his coat and withdrew several folded documents. "I've spent the last 2 months gathering these sworn affidavits from witnesses who can place Yates at our ranch that day, including our former foreman and the doctor who visited our ailing mother. And this," he placed another document before her, "is the most important. A deathbed confession from one of the German settlers admitting to Slattery's killing in retaliation for burned crops and poisoned wells." Amelia stared at the papers, hope rising within her. Will it be enough? It should be. But getting these documents to the court is the challenge. The trial begins in 3 days, and there are people who would prefer this evidence never arrives. His expression hardened. "That's why I need your help." By dawn, they had formulated a plan. Caleb would continue south to deliver the evidence personally, while Amelia would take a different route, carrying copies of the critical documents as insurance against interception. They would meet in Mason County, presenting a united front of support for Yates and overwhelming evidence of his innocence. As Caleb prepared to depart, he paused, studying Amelia with newfound appreciation. "My brother wrote that you were remarkable. Said you had the courage of a frontier legend and the heart to match." A smile softened his weathered features. "I see he wasn't exaggerating. He never mentioned having such a flattering opinion," Amelia replied, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. Yates was always better at showing than telling, Caleb observed. But in his letters from jail, your name appears in nearly every paragraph. A man doesn't write that way about just a former employer. The simple statement confirmed what Amelia had begun to hope during their correspondence, that Yates's feelings mirrored the transformation in her own heart. With renewed determination, she finalized preparations for the journey that might secure his freedom and, perhaps, their shared future. The trip to Texas was arduous. Long days on stagecoaches and trains, nights in rough frontier accommodations. Amelia traveled as inconspicuously as possible, the precious documents secured in a hidden pocket of her traveling dress. Despite her caution, she couldn't shake the feeling of being observed, particularly after crossing into Texas. Her suspicions proved justified when, during a brief stop in a small town north of Mason County, she noticed two men watching her too intently as she reboarded the stage. When the coach was delayed by a broken wheel in an isolated stretch, she quietly slipped away while the other passengers were distracted, hiring a local boy to guide her cross-country to the next settlement. By the time she reached Mason County, the trial had already begun. The courthouse was packed with spectators drawn by the notorious case, forcing Amelia to push her way through curious onlookers. Inside, she immediately spotted Yates at the defense table, thinner than she remembered, his face grave as he listened to testimony against him. The sight of him after so many months of separation sent a physical jolt through her, intensifying her resolve. Scanning the room, she located Caleb near the front and worked her way toward him. When he saw her, relief crossed his features. "You made it," he whispered as she slid into the seat beside him. Was beginning to worry. "There were complications," she murmured. "But I have the documents." Before they could say more, the prosecutor called his star witness, Slattery's cousin, a sallow-faced man who testified with rehearsed precision about supposedly seeing the Quincy brothers at the scene of the murder. As the damning testimony continued, Amelia watched Yates's shoulders tense, his lawyer's attempts at cross-examination largely overruled by a judge who seemed determined to expedite the proceedings. It was only when the witness pointed directly at Yates, declaring, "That's him, the younger one who was carrying the rifle," that Yates finally turned to scan the courtroom, perhaps seeking his brother for support. When his gaze found Amelia, instead, the shock and wonder that transformed his face was visible to everyone present. The prosecutor, noting the distraction, followed Yates's line of sight. "Your Honor, perhaps we should clear the courtroom of any potential witnesses for the defense." "I object," Yates's lawyer countered. "The defense has not yet had opportunity to present its case or call witnesses." As the lawyers argued, Caleb nudged Amelia. "Now's our moment. Follow my lead." He stood abruptly, his commanding presence drawing all eyes. "Your Honor, I must interrupt these proceedings. I am Caleb Quincy, brother of the accused, and I have traveled here with critical evidence that proves his innocence." The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Caleb approached the bench, presenting the affidavits to the startled judge. When the prosecutor attempted to object, Amelia rose as well. "Your Honor, I am Amelia Owens of Cottonwood Springs, Colorado Territory. I carry duplicate copies of this evidence, secured separately to ensure its arrival, and can attest to its proper handling throughout our journey." The formal language, delivered with quiet confidence, created the impression of official involvement that momentarily silenced even the prosecutor. As the judge examined the documents, his expression shifted from skepticism to concern. "This is highly irregular," he declared finally. "But the court cannot ignore sworn testimony that directly contradicts the witness's account." He glared at the prosecutor. "Did your office investigate these potential witnesses before proceeding with charges?" The resulting legal wrangling continued for hours, with the judge ultimately calling a recess until the following day to review the new evidence. As the courtroom cleared, Yates was permitted a brief consultation with his lawyer and brother, and by extension, with Amelia. When she finally stood before him, separated only by the wooden railing of the defense area, words seemed inadequate. His eyes searched her face as though memorizing every detail. "You came all this way," he said softly, wonder in his voice. "Of course I did." The simplicity of her response conveyed everything. That distance and danger were meaningless compared to what he had come to mean to her. "Miss Owens has been quite the ally." his lawyer observed with a knowing smile. Traveled across 3 territories carrying evidence that may well save your neck, young man. Yates's gaze never left hers. She's the most determined woman I've ever known. The judge seems genuinely disturbed by the deathbed confession, Caleb interjected, bringing their focus back to the immediate situation. And the affidavits from respectable citizens place you nowhere near the scene. I think tomorrow may bring better news. The prediction proved accurate. After reviewing the evidence overnight, the judge called the prosecutor and defense lawyer into his chambers the following morning. When court reconvened, he announced that in light of the new testimony and serious questions about the credibility of the state's witness, the charges against Yates Quincy were dismissed without prejudice. The courtroom's reaction was mixed, supporters of the Slattery family shouting in protest, while others applauded the apparent triumph of justice. Through it all, Yates remained composed, shaking his lawyer's hand and embracing his brother before making his way directly to where Amelia stood. Without hesitation or regard for the watching crowd, he took her hands in his. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," she replied. "I was just returning the favor. You protected what was mine, and I protected what was." She hesitated, then finished softly. "What was important to me?" His smile, that transformative expression she had missed for months, illuminated his face. "Important, am I?" "Very," she admitted, returning his smile. Their reunion was interrupted by the approach of several angry men, supporters of the Slattery family clearly dissatisfied with the court's decision. "This isn't over, Quincy," one threatened. "Courts may be fooled, but we know what happened." Caleb stepped forward protectively. "The evidence speaks for itself. My brother is innocent, and the court has recognized that fact. I suggest you all go home and let old grievances rest." The confrontation might have escalated had the sheriff not intervened, dispersing the group with warnings about disturbing the peace. As they departed, he turned to Yates with surprising sympathy. "Best you folks clear out of Mason County for a while. Some wounds take generations to heal, and I can't guarantee your safety if you linger." "We understand," Caleb assured him. "We'll be on the first stage north tomorrow." That evening, in the relative privacy of the hotel's small dining room, Yates finally heard the full account of Amelia's journey and the complications she had overcome to reach him. His expression darkened at the mention of her suspicions about being followed. "Haskell's reach is longer than I thought if he had men watching for you even in Texas," he observed grimly. "Or the Slatterys have connections we don't know about," Caleb suggested. "Either way, we should remain cautious until we're well clear of here." Amelia sipped her tea thoughtfully. "What will you do now? Both of you?" The brothers exchanged glances. "I've established myself in northern Texas," Caleb answered. "Married a widow with a small ranch last year. It's a good life, far enough from Mason County troubles." Yates, however, kept his eyes on Amelia. "I was thinking about Colorado territory. Heard there's good ranching land there, and decent people who judge a man by his actions rather than his name." "Any particular part of Colorado?" she asked, her heart quickening. "There's a homestead north of Pikes Peak I've grown rather fond of," he replied softly. "Has the prettiest view at sunset. Needs some work, but it has remarkable potential." Even Caleb smiled at the transparent meaning behind his brother's words. "Think I'll turn in early," he announced, rising from the table. "Long day tomorrow. Miss Owens, Yates, good night." Left alone, they sat in momentary silence, the months of separation and the intensity of recent events creating both connection and uncertainty. "Your letters kept me going," Yates said finally. "Reading your words, I could almost see your homestead again, the mountains in the distance, the way the light hits the barn in the morning." "Is that all you missed?" Amelia asked, summoning courage. "The scenery?" His expression softened. "No, I missed the woman who stands on her porch at dawn, watching her land come alive. Who works alongside anyone without complaint but won't tolerate shortcuts. Who sees value in broken things and believes they can be mended." The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. "And I miss the man who treats horses with patience instead of force. Who rebuilds fences properly because doing things right matters. Who sees me as neither helpless nor invincible, but as I truly am." Yates reached across the table, his fingers lightly brushing hers. "When I first arrived at your homestead, you said something I've thought about often during these months away." "What was that?" His smile turned wry. "You insisted you weren't looking for anything beyond labor." certainly not entanglements of a personal nature. Amelia felt heat rise to her cheeks at the memory of her initial wariness. I believe connection was a luxury I couldn't afford. That independence meant isolation. And now, his question hung between them, filled with possibility. Now I understand that true strength comes from connection, to land, to community. She turned her hand beneath his, their fingers intertwining. To someone who sees the world as I do. The journey back to Colorado Territory passed in a blur of anticipation and shared plans. Caleb accompanied them as far as Denver, where he bid them farewell with the promise to visit when circumstances allowed. As Yates and Amelia boarded the final stagecoach that would carry them toward Cottonwood Springs, the future they had almost lost stretched before them, filled with possibility. The homestead appeared on the horizon just as evening painted the sky in shades of gold and amber, exactly as Yates had described remembering it during his imprisonment. As they approached, Amelia noted with satisfaction that her arrangements had been honored. The Wilson boy had been checking on the property regularly, ensuring that livestock were tended and no damage occurred in her absence. They halted the rented wagon in the yard, both taking a moment to absorb the scene. The cabin with smoke already rising from its chimney. Martha Wilson's doing, no doubt. The barn where their unlikely partnership had begun. The distant fence line they had repaired together. Home, Yates said simply, the word carrying all the meaning they both felt. As they approached the cabin, the door opened to reveal Martha Wilson herself, beaming with satisfaction at their arrival. Thought you might appreciate a warm welcome, she called, stepping onto the porch. There's stew on the stove and fresh bread cooling. Amelia embraced the older woman gratefully. You've done too much, Martha. Nonsense. Just being neighborly. Martha's eyes twinkled as she nodded toward Yates. Besides, Timothy would never have forgiven me if I hadn't ensured his hero received a proper homecoming. After Martha departed, promising to spread word of their return, Amelia and Yates found themselves alone in the cabin that held so many memories of their beginning. The familiar surroundings highlighted how much had changed between them, how months of separation and shared struggle had deepened what began as simple respect into something profound and enduring. As they sat before the fire, sharing the meal Martha had prepared, Yates finally broached the subject they had both been circling. Amelia, these past months have shown me what's truly important. Not just survival, but building something meaningful. He reached for her hand, his expression earnest. I came to your homestead looking for temporary work on my way elsewhere. But I've come to realize that elsewhere was never a place. It was the feeling of belonging I found here. With you. Tears welled in her eyes at the simple truth of his words. When my father built this place, he called it a legacy, something that would outlast him, that would give me security. But after he died, I mistook isolation for independence. I thought needing no one meant I was strong. And now, she smiled through her tears. Now I understand that true strength comes from connection, from knowing someone stands beside you, not because you can't stand alone, but because together you build something greater than either could alone. Yates rose, drawing her to her feet and into his arms. Amelia Owens, I'm asking to build that something with you. Not as your hired hand, or even as your partner, but as your husband, if you'll have me. The proposal, simple and direct like the man himself, required only one answer. Yes, she whispered, reaching up to trace the beloved contours of his face. Yes, Yates Quincy, I will have you. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with all the emotion they had contained during their long separation. When they finally drew apart, both breathless and smiling, Yates rested his forehead against hers. I wasn't looking for love when I took that wrong turn to your homestead, he murmured. Amelia laughed softly, remembering her own insistence that she sought nothing beyond labor. I know, neither was I. His smile illuminated his entire face as he pulled her closer. It found us anyway. Spring returned to the Colorado Territory, painting the landscape with wildflowers and promise. The Quincy homestead, as it was now known in Cottonwood Springs, had weathered another winter, emerging stronger than before. The cabin boasted a new addition. The barn housed twice as many horses, and the fences stood sturdy against winter's retreat. On the porch, Amelia Quincy watched her husband working with their newest acquisition, a spirited 2-year-old stallion that would, with Yates's patient training, become the foundation of the breeding program they had begun. His gentle approach was already yielding results, the young horse responding to voice commands with increasing confidence. Vernon Haskell had finally abandoned his pursuit of their land after discovering that community sentiment had solidified against his tactics. The Quincy's wedding 6 months earlier had been attended by nearly every family in the valley, a public declaration of support that even Haskell couldn't ignore. His attention had shifted to other targets, though rumors suggested his financial empire was beginning to crumble under questionable investments. Caleb had visited at Christmas, bringing news that the last embers of the Mason County troubles were finally dying out. With time and distance, even old enemies had begun to acknowledge that the Quincy brothers had been convenient scapegoats rather than true culprits in the violence that had scarred the region. As Yates finished the training session and turned toward the cabin, his face lit with the smile that still quickened Amelia's heart. In his eyes, she saw everything she had once thought impossible on the frontier: partnership without domination, strength through vulnerability, love that enhanced rather than diminished independence. "He's coming along nicely," Yates reported, climbing the porch steps to join her. "Another month, and he'll be ready for more advanced training. Just in time for the territorial fair," she noted. "If we're still planning to exhibit." "Absolutely. Folks should see what we're building here." He settled beside her on the bench, his arm naturally finding its place around her shoulders. "Speaking of building, Wilson brought the lumber for the cradle. Says he'll help me finish it next week." Amelia leaned into his embrace, her hand resting on the gentle swell that would become noticeable to others soon enough. Perfect timing. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun sink toward the mountains that had witnessed their unlikely beginning. The frontier that had once seemed to demand isolation as the price of survival now represented possibility, a canvas on which they were creating a shared legacy of connection and belonging. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't taken that wrong turn," Amelia mused. "If you'd found the correct road to Denver that day." Yates pressed a kiss to her temple. "I'd like to think some paths are meant to cross, regardless of wrong turns or right ones. That we would have found each other eventually." "The romantic cowboy speaks," she teased gently. His laugh rumbled against her side. "Only to my wife. My reputation would be ruined if word got out." As twilight settled over their land, Amelia thought of her father, how he had built this place as a gift for her future, never suspecting the full shape that future would take. How the independence he had taught her had ultimately led not to isolation, but to the courage to embrace connection when it appeared in the form of a young cowboy seeking temporary work. "I love you, Yates Quincy," she said simply, the words still new enough to feel like precious gifts. His arms tightened around her, his response carrying all the certainty of a man who had found his true home. "And I love you, Amelia Quincy. Always will." Together they watched darkness gather, secure in the knowledge that dawn would find them as it always did, side by side, building something that would outlast them both on the frontier that had forged their unlikely love.